mean that people like Isaiah or people like that didn't know about Genesis 3:15 and weren't looking forward in faith to the coming Messiah. Right. They didn't know exactly when he would come, what it would look like, and so on and so forth. Just as we look back. And so, so it kind of when you have the overall theme of the scriptures, the redemption, the gospel, and so on, you can always that's why you can always apply that in those scenarios, because you're saved by faith and they're saved by faith. But I see what you're saying, because in those moments you want to make sure that it's clear to those that you're teaching, and when you're interpreting the scripture hermeneutically, you're saying that these people on the thread of redemption, they're on this side, right? And they're looking forward.
And this is how much we say could have known, but this is how much had been revealed, to them at this moment. I mean, before the Davidic covenant, I don't know that there's an eternal kingship concept of within the people of Israel,
because kingship was a foreign idea.
Right.
It was because they were a theocracy under the leadership of God, and you have Moses single, and then you have judges, so a singular sort of redeemer of them, and then you come to the kingly line, and so it's being faithful. I can't be before David and talking about the Davidic covenant. It doesn't exist yet in the knowledge and understanding of the people of Israel up until that point. I know what's coming, but I can't, and I can maybe say, if we can draw a connection from something before that, say, see how this is sort of pointing us towards this, and you can sort of see how this new covenant that God makes with David, the eternal King, that's pointing us towards Christ. I mean, certainly you can do that. You think about the story of Ruth,
the story of Abraham and Isaac.
It's pointing to some of those things. But I think in a literary context, or hermeneutically, we can't assert things that could not have been asserted in their immediate context. And again, that's where I think people can get into danger, especially when they're preaching Old Testament passages, is to make somebody to have known something that they could not have known, and to declare it as Isaiah knew about Jesus, No. He's writing under the inspiration of the Spirit things that you have to understand. Okay, what did Isaiah 53? What would it have meant from Isaiah to those he was prophesying to in the kingdom at that time? Contextually, that meant something then. Now, it also is picturing something, but him prophesying that meant something to them in that moment. And that's what you're trying to discover. That's what it meant then. And so then how do I draw the connection? And part of that can be how it is foreshadowing Christ. But I don't think it can be only. Otherwise, you're avoiding what the immediate audience how they would have understood that. Now, is it talking about the redemptive, that he's going to bring them back out of captivity, and eventually the captivity that is our sin, we're going to be rescued from that? I think that there's some connectivity to some of those ideas, but you can't overtly just say, well, this is Jesus. We can, because we see Jesus in Matthew 1 and Luke 1 being born of a virgin. But how would the Israelite have understood that?
And I think that's one that's really difficult in prophetic text specifically, because even sometimes you have the duality. I mean, you think about what everybody says about Isaiah 14. The king of Tyre, is it? And the prophecy, whether or not he's also very much immediately speaking about the king of Tyre, and also prophesying Satan's fall in the midst of that. And so even in the prophecies themselves, there's a little bit of clear duality of this. Okay, this in its immediate context has to be referring to the king of Tyre, but then also, how would they have put? If they would just put this figuratively in some of this, because some of this can't be the king of Tyre, and separating, distinguishing between the two. So that's one of the, I think, really.
And so moving into your New Testament, that's where a lot of clarity comes, especially when you think about the book of Hebrews. How it makes clear some of that duality from Old Testament. You go, okay. But the guy in the first century, and the Israelite wouldn't have known, because he didn't have Hebrews. So now the first century Judeo-Christian can begin to have those ideas, which is why, I think, with the ministry of Paul amongst the Jews and why you see it sort of flourishing is because it's like the light goes off. It's like, oh, okay, I see that. Now, of course, under the work of the Holy Spirit regenerating their hearts, but that all that was being laid, and it's like God says, boom, now's the time.
Right.
Paul, you're going to go to the Jew and then to the Gentile, and sort of the final revealing of what's being laid for generations and centuries is now sort of blossoming. So the way I look at it, it's like a flower is growing, and then when you come to Christ in the final formation of the church in the New Testament, it's like the blossoming of the flower into its fullness. Yeah. And that's why the story of redemption, I think, is that same picture. It's coming, it's growing, more and more is being revealed. There's this time of silence that's preparatory, as you study church history, which we do in Module 7, the preparation time of what's taking place with the Greek takeover and the Greek language and the Roman roads and trade, and the Jewish religious system sort of solidifying during this period of time, and then Christ comes, and it's like the whole thing opens up, and everything that was being, it was building is now blossomed. Literary context is making sure that I put that 3, 4, 5, 6 verses correctly into that bigger picture. And we do that not by going from these 7 verses to, Genesis to Revelation. I do that by going, okay, here are these 3, 4, 5, 6 verses. Then we look at a paragraph above and below. And if we've been faithful to find the right pericope, the right passage, then that's the preaching passage. And then above it and below it's probably a different preaching passage. But because it's in the flow, it's going to be contextually in where it's supposed to be, and that's why you work out. Instead of just throwing these 6 verses in 66 books. It's like throwing a penny into the ocean.
Right.
Versus going down into just a small fountain.
Which is why you should preach line by line, verse by verse. That's what
Well, expository preaching is definitely the most faithful way of teaching. I think most effective way of preaching. That book I was talking about last night, Keller's book, is really helpful about thinking about expository preaching. He talks about expository preaching is not just line by line, verse by verse. It's taking a passage and preaching it faithfully that way. And I think the most effective way for expository preaching is to start in the beginning of a book and work through it.
Well, it just makes all that we just talked about easier when it's not something that you just have said, but it's something like we go to the Gospel of John. We talk about John 20 all the time, that the purpose of this is so that they would believe and know that Jesus is the Son of God. And so just to reiterate in Acts chapter 1, talking about the model of the church pushing forward to the nation. So as you're able to preach through books, you're able to get sort of like who was it? Robert Alford, who did the the overall theme of each book and then the dominating theme of each text. As you tie those to the threads of the gospel, you're able to say, okay, well, this overall theme is this book, and this is how this ties in now to the redemptive history of so on and so forth. So I think it just makes it easier.
Marita calls it the main point of the text and the main point of the sermon.
Right.
The main point of the text will never change.
Right.
Because it's what it meant.
Yeah.
Original audience, original author. And I think that's even in lesson 9 or 10 we talked about that a little bit. And the main point of the sermon is saying, okay, now given this main point of the text, what do I want them, that is the audience, to gain from, learn from, what I want them to obey or do as a result of that main point of the text. This is, hermeneutics is
Stephen Alford.
Easier when you go through a book, because a lot of this is on the front end heavy, front end heavy as far as the study. Paul wrote Philippians. He wrote chapters 1 through 4. He wrote the whole thing.
Right.
So once I've done the background on Paul writing to the church of Philippi, I don't have to do that again week over week.
Right.
So if I can spend the time doing the historical study, the background study of Philippi and Paul and prison and all that, compile all that, say, okay, now I come to the text. Now I come passage by passage, and I can sort of jump into the literary context, because if it being an epistle, it's an epistle from now until kingdom come. It's not going to change genres. Some of the grammar stuff is not going to change. So that helps you as a student of the word, interpreter of the word, if you take expository preaching book by book that way, to avoid all that week by week extra work, if you will, or laboring work. Blomberg and Hubbard, they have just a little bit different set of circles. They say the immediate text context, the book context, the author's corpus, the perfect testament context, and the biblical context. Now, you can modify and draw your own circles as you want as you're teaching. But I think the idea we want to communicate is that, again, we want to take our immediate preaching passage and correctly put it within a broader, and then broader, and then eventually where the last, we want that little passage to be understood in the grand scheme of Genesis to Revelation, the redemptive narrative. And so that's the core of what we're trying to get to. Now, he does talk about, I think it's Naselli talks about the theological meaning of each book, page 191 in Naselli's book. He says the New Testament is the climax of one grand story that starts with the Old Testament. The theological message of the Old Testament and New Testament is unified. God reigns, saves, and satisfies through covenant for His glory in Christ. This must fit under the bigger umbrella of the narrative's redemptive message. Okay. So then, how does each book help me understand what God is communicating? Now, we're getting to big hermeneutical ideas, and we're thinking about taking a book and saying, okay, what's its redemptive theme, or what is its major theme under the redemptive narrative? And depending upon time, this might be a part of this that we don't necessarily dive into as heavily. It's not as crucial a hermeneutical idea, I think, as some of the other things we've talked about. However, it can be helpful to help them think at least through the idea. Hey, what is an overarching theme or redemptive theme as it relates to the book of Joshua or Judges or even 1st and 2nd Kings? 1st and Chronicles. What could we draw from that to help basically give them some of those bigger circles, help sort of answer some of those questions for them, so when they get into their immediate context, some of those outer circles are already handled. You know what I'm saying? So they don't have to go back and try to guess again. What those are. Within literary context, right? Within literature, we're talking about words. So within each paragraph, within each passage, the words that are being used. So we draw out the idea of word studies. Now, again, this is one of those things that's going to be challenging, given the issues of translation and translations, and then not necessarily having the Greek in hand. Now, there's a handout, another appendix in the back of the material that would be sort of something you could use to help them with that. But we're looking to unpack keywords, phrases, and concepts. Why are word studies so important? Why would a word study be important to help them to kind of think through as we're in our literary context? What do you think?
Because words have meaning.
Words have meaning. Good job. You think the authors pick certain words at specific times to communicate certain ideas? Do you think they didn't just arbitrarily pick a certain word to put into their letter at a specific time? Or is it just, this word will do? Or did they use specific words to communicate a specific meaning in a specific passage?
Absolutely.
I think so. I think exactly. So, I'll throw this one out there to you. John 3:16, what's the word used for world? Anybody know?
The Greek word?
It's cosmos.
Right.
Meaning what?
Meaning,
Cosmos.
yeah, universe.
Huh.
Whole.
So it doesn't just mean mankind.
Right.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because what do we like to use that verse to kind of assert?
That,
For God so loved me.
Me or man.
right.
And the word John uses is cosmos, which is cosmos. He loved the world. He loved his entire creation. Couple that with Romans, right? Chapters, 7 and 8? 8 right there where Paul talks about the earth groaning for redemption. The cosmos groaning for redemption. So it will be redeemed one day, set free from the futility that's been subjected to.
Yeah, mankind's not the only thing that's
There you go. So now what I can't do is make John 3:16 apply only to men, and that God so loved man or mankind. So now I was like, okay, that helps me to understand where really clear passages about what God's teaching about soteriology and soteriological ideas, something that might seem a little unclear out of John 3:16 comes a little more clear because, okay, this is not just man. This is cosmos.
And then you add the whosoever into the context of the entirety of John 3, talking
Right.
about Nicodemus,
Right.
referring to him as a rabbi, who's wanting him to be his teacher, who then he expands on the idea of, maybe not whosoever as in all people.
Just all people.
Or all kinds of people, not just us, not just foreshadowing for
Yeah.
prophesying towards Gentiles.
See? Now, literary context helps me to interpret passages that have, in some ways and oftentimes, been misunderstood, misrepresented.
The whole world just got melted down.
So that's why I think word studies are important. Words that mean the authors pick specific words. Words change over time. Words' meaning change over time. Words have connotative, and denotative meaning. Denotative meaning. Connotative meaning means figurative. Donative meaning, explicit reference and meaning. So, man, words are really important to make sure we understand what's being communicated and why. So when Paul uses a word in a particular passage, and we find out that's the only time he uses that word in this case, why? Why did he pick this word in this moment to this church, this epistle, to this person to communicate? That means something. Now, that doesn't mean that the whole world's coming to an end, but it means that I need to maybe spend a little bit of time figuring out why did he use that word and in this phrase? Why did he describe it this way? You know, oftentimes when Jesus is referred to, sometimes it's the Lord Jesus, sometimes it's Jesus Christ, sometimes it's Jesus Christ, the Son of Man. So why does the author use the term to identify Jesus the way he does? Is there meaning behind that? I also like to think about this with specificity when I'm sort of thinking about the way we refer to God. Sometimes we just generically say God, and in the passage maybe he's talking about the Father. It might be referring to the Son. It might be referring to the Holy Spirit. So we should teach with the same specificity that the author was intending to communicate. If he's referring to Jesus, then we need to refer to Jesus instead of just generically sort of laying it out there. I think that's how sometimes some of our Trinitarian theology gets sort of muddled because we're not as specific as we need to be when the passage or the way it's being referred to has specificity. So, words have meaning, and the literary context is part of where we want to discover this. 4 steps to doing word studies. I adapted this from both Naselli and Klein and Blomberg. Choose Greek word, or we might have to obviously go into the English or French text and find specific words that require detailed analysis. See maybe the range of meanings in the New Testament, and select the meaning that best fits the context.
Only 3.
Yeah, I see that now. Okay, well, there's 3 steps.
We'll add it to the other.
That must be a typo.
There's also only 6 questions up versus your 7 questions. The first time you go through it.
The very first time?
Yeah, the first time. The last one gets left off.
Background. See, this is why that's why I like you guys. Help me to remember. I'll go back and make those corrections. So what we need to help do while we're sort of instructing this is maybe take a passage and practically just give them something where you know, basically you've already sort of prepared. Say, okay, hey, let's go look at Philippians 2, 5 through 8. What words, and you let them say, hey, what words do you think would be significant that you'd want to try to do a little bit of study on? And see what they come back with. You have an idea of what you think it should be. Let them see what they've come up with, and then you say, okay, well, think about this. What about this word? If they don't come up with that word, or if they do, say, okay, yeah, why that word? I think this is the module that we can be the most interactive with our trainees, because there is a lot of putting into practice and exercising what we're teaching.
Yeah, it's also the one where I think interpretation is going to be so likely key, because you can be given a Greek or Hebrew word that's could mean a whole different bunch of things in their context, and have to find what's the this particular word, the Hebrew that he uses. Like if you were to do cosmos, universe, they could have a translation like we would use for heavens, which would be 3-tier.
Right.
What level of heavens are you referring to, and so
Right.
on. So that sounds like a lot of fun.
It will be fun.
It's gonna be fun.
It will be fun, because be reminded that these guys want to learn.
Yeah.
Early on in some of my training times, when I was asked a question, I thought, "You trying to question me?"
Yeah.
Like I took it personally. Like, hey man, you're not listening to me, And then as I've just discovered, no, these guys, man, they're really struggling. Like they want to know.
Right.
They're asking difficult questions, not in an accusatory or combative way. Like they want to properly understand. I can probably count on one hand the number of times that there has truly been some sort of a combative type question. Once was in Senegal back in February, and this poor lady, she just did not see the fact